Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff, Mosher, Adam Caplan here for a free agent edition of Inside the Birds. It was a wild, wild week of free agency. Some of the craziest storylines, especially from an Eagles perspective, that you'll ever seen. Whatever happened there with Darius Slay, as we talked about on the last podcast, is definitely something unique that Adam and I will talk about. And Adam, of course, the bigger news is that CJ Gardner-Johnson was not retained by the Eagles. He finally signed his contract with the Lions.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it's another strange situation. He clearly didn't get the money that he originally went into free agency looking for. This is a great deal for the Lions. Reportedly $6.5 million fully guaranteed at signing. It's a 1-year prove it deal. So just a very odd and strange week in free agency.
So yeah, and the Slay deal, one thing that I find interesting, because remember they were going to cut Slay. Well, they would have had the money to bring back Gardner-Johnson. They tried. I'd like to know how hard they tried once the Slay thing changed its course, because it's very strange, because this is a guy they definitely identified they wanted to bring back. This is the fact when they made that trade, both sides agreed to revisit the situation after the season. Mm-hmm. He obviously played great. And then you move this forward with Slay. They tell Slay they're going to cut him. Okay? Remember, it was put out there they were going to do with a post-June 1. That would have cleared up cap space and eventually, and they were going to move on without Slay. And then they changed their mind, which is not like the Eagles to let that out. And then 3 hours later, they start redoing this deal. It's definitely a bizarre situation.
Yeah. Bizarre. And then I know a lot of people probably felt that when you do a deal like that with Slay, I don't want to call it a restructure, a new deal that probably clears up cap space in 2023, that there was sort of a marriage between then getting it done with CJ Gardner-Johnson, and then to see that CJ Gardner signs a 1-year, it's definitely a prove it deal. He reunites with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, from who he's with in New Orleans, out there in Detroit, for what was reported to be $6.5 million with a chance to make $8 million. I mean, $8 million. There was the top end of Jesse Bates, which we knew he wasn't going to get, which was $16 million. There was the $14 million tag, which the Eagles obviously were correct not to use on him because the market was certainly not there. And then a lot of those other safeties, from Poyer to Donovan Wilson, to who else? Javon Bell. They were all Marcus Epps, all in that 6 to 8 range. CJ Gardner gets 6.5 with a chance to make 8. That's sort of fascinating to me. And it really shows what we've talked about real quick, is that this is a guy who the league clearly felt conflicted in trying to evaluate at 1 year at safety and playing that hybrid nickel and safety spot.
That clearly was used against him by the clubs, and the Eagles had this is our early intel was that they were using the data that they had, and our guy Sam, our intern, had, and that would lower his asking price. Mm-hmm. But when you look at this player now, think about this. Let's move this forward. Slay and Bradberry are back. You've got 230. Slay just turned 32 in January. Bradberry turns 30 soon. So your two starting corners are older. You don't have a safety you don't have a starting safety under contract right now. Reed Blankenship would be a default one, but that's not really what they want. So this is for a team that looks like they want to run it back. You have to ask yourself some questions here. Why would they walk away from, or did he walk away from them? Did they make a final offer and he said, screw that, I'm not taking that, that's too low? We don't know. We'll find out. But this is an interesting situation, because things kind of changed over time in terms of what they were willing to pay him. And then the Slay thing comes back. And by the way, also another part of this is you also have a cash budget, which Rick Spielman talked about on our Patreon show. There's only so much cash you're willing to pay in free agency. I get cap is one thing, cash is another. But the Slay thing, remember, I think they fully guaranteed, the report from ESPN was $23 million to Slay.
Yeah.
And that was not, remember, they were going to cut Slay. They're going to walk away from that $17 million, which was not guaranteed. You go from walking away from $17 million in cash to then fully guaranteeing $23 million to Slay. That's like you can't plan on that.
Just
and that changed just in a minute. Remember, they were going to cut him.
Right. So listen, we've been covering this team for a long time, this executive, Howie Roseman, for a long time. It's hard for me not to think that there's a door number two. There's something he's got in his mind, a different move, a follow-up. We've seen it before. Uh, because I sort of surprised why he went higher on the Slay deal, but would not give more than 6.5 fully guaranteed to
Something weird going on here.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's just
it's
something that
yeah,
will make sense later on. I'm positive. You know, we're doing this podcast, it's coming out. Most people are listening to this on what,
yeah.
Monday morning, right? The CJ news dropped late Sunday. So so we need more time to really look into all this, but I just
Yeah.
have to have a feeling now is the time. I mentioned this on a podcast like a month ago, no, like a couple weeks ago, where now might be the time to start to look at some of the better safeties around the league who are 3 years into a 4-year deal, who aren't getting extended, and wondering if there's something there. You know, nobody knew that CJ Gardner was going to be available until last August, but might be time to study some rosters and see what teams are doing with their own guys, and seeing if Howie's on to something somewhere else.
All right. So here are the safeties that are out there. Just so we, just before we move on here, I'll give you the safeties that are out there. John Johnson, the Eagles had some interest in before he signed with the Browns 3 years ago. He's out there. Adrian Amos, who's 30 now, formerly at Penn State. You might remember him with the Packers. Good. He's an older safety, but he'd be a stopgap guy. And then there's LaMarcus Joyner's more of a nickel. And then Deron Harmon is 32 years old. Cosell talked about it. I remember Greg saying a couple weeks ago, he goes, look, if they fail to sign Gardner-Johnson, that might be a guy who would fit.
University of Delaware guy, Deron Harmon. That's right. I believe a University of Delaware guy. I'm almost positive. I'm gonna have to check that now. All of a sudden, my brain
Deron Harmon?
is, yeah. I thought it was a UD guy, but I could be wrong. I will check that really quickly.
Rutgers.
I'm sorry, Rutgers. He's from Dover, Delaware. That's where I knew he was. He's
Big
from
safety
Delaware.
too, over 6'2". Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we will effort more information on what happened with CJ Gardner-Johnson
weird.
there. That was
It's not like them to walk away
strange.
from a talented guy who was its absolute steal. And remember, they gave up two. I know there were two lower end draft picks, but it's not like them to do that.
Right.
After this is a guy they made it clear they're going to try to resign him. And then I get the Slay thing might have thrown them a curveball. And here's another thing. You do wonder if they made a last ditch effort to sign him and he goes, I'm not signing for that. They move on to Slay then? Because that's the weirdness of the Slay situation as we transfer to him. Why would they put it out there that they're going to cut Slay with a post June 1 and 3 hours later they start trying to resign him? That is bizarre. That's not like them. That's really weird.
You're right. There's probably a connection there. It's just hard to figure out. All I know is that the Lions got a really good deal there.
Oh, what is, in fact, that's that team, man. Because if you look at their situation at safety, Kirby Joseph, who was a steal, who did a really good job when he got a chance to play, was a third rounder last year out of Illinois. And Tracy Walker, who they signed to an extension a couple years ago, had a serious injury. So he'll come in there and obviously he can play nickel. Remember, they got Cam Sutton in there and Manuel Mosley came over for the Niners. So they're stacking up those Lions.
I had done some interviews on Philly radio stations over the last 3 or 4 days, and people kept asking me, of course, about the CJ Gardner-Johnson situation. And what I kept saying is, typically when a guy of this stature is still a free agent, and it means he's not getting what he wants and what he normally does. And I started to feel like this was going to happen, was that he was going to sign a 1-year prove-it deal. But in no way would I have thought that the 1-year prove-it deal was still only going to be 6.5 fully guaranteed with a chance to make 8. I thought there would be a little bit more into it, maybe like an 8 with a chance to make 10 or 11. That's what I thought, because that's just how I thought. You know, most people think he's one of the top free agents out there. And when I say most people, I'm talking about people we talked to in the league.
Yes. Oh, that no doubt. No, again, Bill Polian told us this. When you get to Sunday or Monday, this is basically the end of the first week, begin the second, you're getting a heavily discounted deal. There's just no way to get around it. And boy, what a steal for the Lions. And so let's move this forward. This is what the Eagles situation looks like right now in the secondary.
Yeah.
So Slay's back, Bradberry's back. Greedy Williams signs a 1-year deal. We know it's not for a lot of money. We're not sure exactly yet, but we'll get that for you. Blankenship would be a default starter at safety, and then they don't have another starting safety.
Yeah,
And
like
but
right
again,
now,
he's
up the
not saying he's
middle. Sorry, up the
good.
middle is a very big question for the
Yes.
Eagles. Yeah, I mean, we assume N'Kobe Dean steps into a starting role. We don't know who the other linebacker is,
Yep.
and the other two safeties are a big question mark. And I get a feeling that when the season kicks off on September or whatever, that there are going to be names in those positions that they're not across our minds right now. They're not Eagles right now, and
Yeah.
that Howie's got something. But you're right, across the middle, up the middle is an uncertainty, and I would say Adam on the perimeter, while they're running it back with a tandem that was very good for them last year, they have not necessarily gotten younger, more dynamic, or more faster. And in fact, they've done the opposite. They've sort of locked themselves in to more than just 1 year of these guys, at least financially, going forward. So it's hard not to think that Bradberry and Slay won't be your tandem, not just in 2023, but also in 2024. So there is an urgency on this team to start drafting and developing now. So you got guys ready to step it. You don't want to go from those guys to rookies. Remember when Andy Reid went from Bobby and Troy and he was able to get Lito and Sheldon in there? It was a nice, smooth transition, right? It wasn't just one after the other, I don't think. So I think the Eagles would like to have good plan Bs, and it's not been a position that they've done well at for years and years in drafting.
And don't forget, they lost Denard Wilson, the excellent DB's coach, to the
Yep.
Ravens. So there's some change to the secondary, and it's great that they got Slay back, guy they were going to walk away from, but he's back.
Mm-hmm.
But losing Gardner-Johnson is huge because he's not just a safety because he's a 3-position player based on the data, though that was kind of used against him. And obviously he, as you saw on Twitter, he was frustrated. He kept saying disrespect, and he would delete it.
Yeah.
But he got a deal. At least he's with a good young team. But this hurts the Eagles. There's no doubt because there's nobody like him, and they're going to have to dress it. They can get a veteran who could be a stopgap, but there's just nobody like this kid.
Yeah, you wonder in the end if getting back to Bradberry, if he, I was told Denver had an offer for him, that it was a multi-year offer. I just
You
wonder.
mean Gardner-Johnson?
Yes, I said getting back. What did I say? I'm
said
sorry. I meant
Bradberry.
getting back to CJ
Okay.
Gardner-Johnson. If
Okay.
that he's going to, he regrets maybe, if he had offers that were a little bit better and thought he was good. Like we always say, the longer you're in free agency, the money dries up. It doesn't get the money doesn't get better. It dries
No, it
up because
doesn't.
teams move
No.
on. They fit, and you just wonder if that was the case here for Gardner-Johnson. Sometimes you overplay your hand. It's happened millions of
Yeah,
times, and we'll just see. He has to have another
it's
good
too
year
bad.
now.
Too bad because this is a guy they developed, and Denard Wilson deserves a ton of credit. I know someone asked me if Gardner-Johnson doesn't come back, is partially because Denard Wilson's gone, and he was a guy who kind of kept him alive. I couldn't answer that. I just know Denard Wilson did a phenomenal job with him, and obviously he flourished in the defense last season. And I see what's left is Osatre is a special teamer. Marquise Blair is a kid who's got great size, but had major injury history with Seattle. You can't count on him.
Right.
Devon Wallace is on the last year of his rookie deal, is more of a force safety. Blankenship right now will be the starter. And again, that's it.
Crazy. All right. Well, we'll ask Greg Cosell about some of the Eagles' free agent signings, Rashaad Penny, Greedy Williams. We actually had an awesome conversation about the Eagles getting Greedy Williams in our first Intel with Greg Cosell when we went over cornerbacks with him, first or second, which was about a month ago. I found the video, cut the clip of us talking about it. It almost seems prophetic now that they've signed him. So we'll have Greg's thought process on that, and just on some of the free agents that are still out there, and some of the bigger signings. Adam Thielen going to Carolina. That's interesting. So we'll get Greg Cosell, and then we'll also, this is going to be Wednesday morning that it drops. We'll also get into our draft preview. It'll start this week and carry all the way us to the draft. And we will start again with cornerbacks, because even with these two guys back, Bradberry and Slay, it's going to have to be a position that the Eagles, maybe not first round now, maybe not 10th overall, but definitely a position that they're going to have to start looking at in the draft. So that'll be out Wednesday morning, the Intel with Greg Cosell. Also, again, on Wednesday, you'll have your Discord chat with our Patreon subscribers. That's going to be a really good one. I'm sure people are going to have a ton of questions. If you want to get in on that, it's patreon.com/inside the birds. And I know that we owe our listeners and subscribers through Patreon, and Ask ITV live stream. We'll be doing that very soon as well. So stay tuned for the announcement. And the Rick Spielman interview that's up is fantastic. If you really want to learn about how a team ranks free agents, scouts free agents, everything that goes into free agency from a planning perspective, you got to watch the video Rick did, who is not just the Vikings GM, but also the Dolphins GM at 1.2, just does a really good job of painting that picture for us. Really appreciate that from Rick. All right, let's get into everything. Like we've already covered Darius Slay. Is there anything more to say on Darius Slay here? It was a very odd situation.
It's just not like the Eagles to put it out there that they're not going to bring a guy back. They're going to cut him. After everything had happened, they gave DeRozan, Slay's agent, the ability to seek a trade. They couldn't find what they wanted, so they decided they were going to cut him. It was reported they were going to cut him. 3 hours later, then they changed their mind. It's just there's just something very odd. I've never seen anything like this in 21 years of covering this business. I've seen it's okay that they changed their mind. I get that. It helps them stay to be very competitive. I get that, but it's just not like them to change face. And it's one thing if they didn't let it get out there, if they didn't tell reporters that they're going to cut them. That's one thing. They changed their mind and never let it get out there, but they let it get out there.
Yeah.
And I don't blame those reporters. They were just putting it out there, but it's just not like them to do that. And I just wondered, I would love to know, did Jeffrey Lurie get involved? Like, what was the impetus to change their mind all of a sudden? Was it Gardner-Johnson was being difficult? Did he say, no, I'm not doing this deal? And they said, all right, well, they're going to give it to Slay. I don't know. It's just very strange.
I think if you had Howie Roseman and you shot him up with truth serum right before free agency would start and said, what do you think is going to happen with your secondary? I think he would have said, we're going to lose Epps. We're going to be able to bring back CJ. We're going to lose Bradberry to a bigger deal than what he eventually wound up getting. And Darius Slay is just going to stay Darius Slay. Maybe we'll see there. I don't think he could have predicted the sort of saga that they were going to go through for Slay.
So weird.
Yeah,
you're right.
Just odd.
Right.
Just odd. I really do think that Bradberry coming back at a lower number, we thought he was going to make a little bit more, but the cornerback market in general this year just wasn't flourishing. It was good. It's not like his contract's bad, but it's not $21 million like some of the top end corners. So them to be able to bring him back on a multi-year deal, wonder if that sort of, while they were going through it with CJ and nothing's happening, I wonder if that sort of caused a shift in their philosophy.
Well, Bradberry gets $12.6 million per season, which is it. Being that he was cut by the Giants last year, it's pretty good. And what a story he's been of reviving his career in this match carry deliver defense. And Slay's back, and right now, so with those two guys there and Gardner-Johnson back, Maddox is back as the slot. Greedy Williams right now will be the favorite. Now, again, I get it. We're only in March now, so a lot of things could change. But Greedy Williams will be that third corner outside.
Yeah, interesting. So you're assuming he's going to beat out Zach McPherson, huh?
Yeah, big reach there, huh? But he's a kid. Let's get it in. Greg Cosell, as you said earlier, Greg happened to talk about him. We do the cornerback group and our intel show with him. And he's got the height, weight, and speed, but he's been a significant underachiever. A lot of it's got to do with injury. He's not a physical corner. He's long. He can run. But I just sense that the Browns are ready to move on from him. And it just didn't work as a former second rounder in 19. A lot of injuries, unfortunately. He just never became the player they thought he would be.
Yeah, I know we've both talked to some people about Greedy Williams. I spoke to a personnel guy from the NFC, and he did Greedy coming out of LSU. Now, if you remember, Greg told us that was in the clip that Greedy was considered one of he was considered at the time coming out of LSU the next great LSU corner. There's been Patrick Peterson. There's been a lot of guys coming out of LSU who have been really, really good corners. I should probably be able to rattle off more off the top of my head, but Patrick Peterson's the only one I can think of at the moment. They'll all come to me after I'm done with the pod. But what the personnel guy said to me was he felt like the traits, which are obviously there, the speed, the ability to carry vertically, it was all there, it was great. But he felt that also made him a little bit more attractive in the draft analyst eye than what you really see when you scout him. Not a great tackler, not someone who's going to come up. I mean, I know that that's not what corners are judged on, but not like a hard-nosed physical type player. So like you were mentioning, I think you talk about Sauce Gardner, how that guy was an all-pro. He stepped on the field in the NFL and he was an all-pro. It's amazing. There's not too many of those guys you're ever going to see, but Greedy was definitely someone that they thought was going to be this just physically gifted, amazing corner. But he only went in round 2. He wasn't a first-round pick, and he just has not been able. He's been hurt, and I think he's just not been able to show people what they thought he originally might be.
Correct. Yeah. So look, he'll get a shot here at a 1-year deal, and it doesn't preclude them from doing something in the draft. But with the 2 veterans back, I mean, could they? I would hope they wouldn't ignore it in this draft because, you hope it being that the Eagles are a good football team, they're not picking as high. Well, obviously, the pick overall, 10th overall is the Saints pick, but you're hoping that they keep picking in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a year, you mentioned Sauce Gardner. There's no one like Sauce Gardner in this draft. The early word we've heard, Witherspoon, the corner from Illinois, is probably the best corner from with this draft. Joey Porter Jr. is pretty good. The question is, where does he go? But Witherspoon's a guy that may or may not be there at 10, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Mixed bag. I feel like each of the 3 corners that you hear most of, Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., and Christian Gonzalez, all have a different
Another one. Yep.
feature or asset that might make them the top corner or might not make them the top corner. I know Witherspoon, personnel people hate when a guy comes out of nowhere and has this great senior year and the tape from sophomore, junior year just isn't there. That Witherspoon, I don't want to call him a 1-year wonder, but I don't think he was on a whole lot of like watch lists coming out of his the season before this one. Joey Porter Jr. is very good, but he has very few interceptions. He just hasn't made a lot of playmaking plays at Penn State. He gets his hands on ball. He just hasn't had a ton of interceptions. And Christian Gonzalez probably has the most athletic traits of all of them. So he might have a chance to be the first one taken. But I just coming back from the combine, guys have said that in his interview they were looking for a little bit more presence and command, and didn't feel that from him. Maybe he's a soft-spoken kid, I don't know, but the tape is very good. So it'll be interesting. But like you said, if you start talking to guys about Sauce Gardner or a Patrick Surtain, right, and then compare them to this crop, you're not going to get like, oh yeah, you're not going to get an A to B, apples to apples comparison there.
It's amazing. If you go back to last year, I can remember the November of 21. Yeah, that was the first time I'd really heard a lot about Sauce Gardner. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy might be, because every personnel guy I would talk to goes, this kid's special.
Yeah.
Like, all right, full name. And he wound up being that guy. And then where Derek Stingley Jr., I was shocked that the Texans, obviously, it looks like a bad mistake right now. They took him over Sauce Gardner to the life of me. I don't know why, other than they felt Stingley may have been a better fit for Lovie Smith's defense. They fired Lovie. Stingley wasn't as good, and Sauce Gardner looks like he might be one of the best corners in the league already.
Yeah. I mean, he was an all-pro, right, as a rookie. So crazy.
Incredible. Yep.
All right. Who else comes back? Boston Scott is back on another 1-year deal, Adam, which is I think we all could have predicted that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah. So we have the details. It's 1 year. He got a raise of about $250,000. It's 1 year, $2 million, 1.08 fully guaranteed at signing. So did he get a little bit of a raise because of the Giants numbers? Who knows? But he's back for $2 million. And look, he's got this role, and he's a good backup player. And also, look, he's done a kind of a sneaky kickoff returner.
Yeah, that is true. Hey, man, he had to play the Giants 3 times last year. That's 3 out of 17. That's what, almost about a fifth of a season, a sixth of a season. So that's, you got to pay a guy when he's going to play that much of your season. Jason Kelce back, same deal, right? 1 year, fully guaranteed.
Yep, it's exactly the same structure. 1 year. Oh yeah, and the thing we could add, which we didn't say last week or last show, it is all fully guaranteed like last year. 14.25 fully guaranteed at signing, max 14.75, exactly the same structure. If again he wants to come back, they'd have to give another deal, like probably a 1 year deal. They just would have to revisit it because there's there's like a dumb they're dummy years, but there's I think there's a base salary of like a veteran minimum the next year or something. They
That's
have
what
to.
keeps him from being a free agent, right?
Yes, yeah, it's really weird. Yeah, I haven't seen too much of that, but it's so good he's coming back because he's I guess you could say he's the best center in football still at 35 years old, turned 36 late this fall.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard to say he's not. Creed Humphrey is off to a great start with Kansas City as a second rounder, but Kelsey, and plus he gets you out of a tough spot, sees everything. He's amazing. And then here's the question now with Cam Jurgens and Seuamlo moving on to Pittsburgh for 3 years, 24 million, which was reported by Jerry Dulac, who covers the Steelers, so $8 million a year. What do they do now with Jurgens? Does he compete for that job against Driscoll? What, that's the question. I guess he would.
I would think so. I mean, they were cross training him at right guard last year in camp until Kelsey hurt his elbow. Remember, he needed the surgery, and then they wound up playing Cam Jurgens at center, which was great for Cam and his development as a future center, but it was not great for the team that was trying to cross train him at right guard. But he's got a whole now off season to be able to do it. You're right, though. It's a little bit of a question mark because it's not like he was a 4-year lineman at Nebraska. I think he was only a center for 2 years there, correct? He was a tight
Yeah, in
end.
fact, yeah, he was a tight end, and then he moved to center for 2 years. So he's still new to the offensive line, and I just think it's a good thing. A, Kelsey's still great, and B, it gives Jurgens another year of development.
But the loss of Seuamlo, and that's sort of an example of a guy who was out in free agency, but still wound up getting a decent deal. Now we thought he was going to get more. The injury history must have been a factor for him to be out that long, but he still got $8 million a year, which is probably top guard money, correct? I mean, I don't think there are any guards making 10 to 12, are there?
Nate Davis got 10 with the Bears, who's much younger. Now he's a smaller guy, but he doesn't have Isaac's injury history. Yeah, there's no question it hurt him. Man, a lot of teams liked him, but you're seeing this. If you've got an injury history, it's pretty significant. It's pretty universal. You and I talked to enough teams. He was the top-rated guard center. That doesn't mean you're getting guard big-time money. It just means that it's like with all these receivers, they got 11 million. They weren't getting 15, 17 million, which some people thought they were going to get.
Right.
They got 11 million because they were top of the group, but they're not really that good. They're sort of like, they're like at a B level, not an A level. And that's why they didn't get top.
Got it. All right. Brandon Graham back. Now, it sounds like you have the details of his contract, right? Yes. It was the way it was reported and what it is a little bit different, I believe.
So it's 1 year, $5 million. It's all fully guaranteed, though. We checked that over the weekend. But I guess it's up to 6. Is that the story?
Oh, was that? I thought the early reports were 8, so up to 6. Okay.
Yeah, I think the money here's what we do know: $5 million is fully guaranteed at signing. That's what was told to us.
Right.
And that's the cap. There may be some upside date. I don't know. I'm going to look into a little bit more details. But BG's back, as we talked about the last show. Fletcher Cox. Now it's 1 year, up to 10 million. We have not seen the breakdown, but we know it's not 10 million. We know there's incentives. Now we don't know if it's 50% incentives, if it's 1 year 5 million or 1 year 7 million plus incentives. We don't know, but it's not. I don't believe it's 1 year. In fact, what we've heard, it's not 1 year 10 million. But when it's reported, it's up to. Sometimes it's 50% of that. Sometimes it's 70%. We just don't know yet. But look, anything with incentives with Fletcher Cox at his age would be a good thing. I think would be smart.
Yeah, I actually think this is a fair and good deal for them, especially losing Javon Hargrave, and you have to play Jordan Davis next year at the 0. So you need 2 guys. I mean, you had Fletch and you had Javon next to either Jordan Davis or Linval Joseph. Now with no Javon and not being sure that Milton Williams is the guy that's ready to be a starter or a first and second down player, I think getting Fletcher Cox back at a deal that isn't $14 million, that's what he played on last year.
Oh, yeah.
And is only up to 10, I think that's fair. I mean, I know we're getting into this whole running it back and you're not getting much younger and you're not getting much more dynamic, but at some point, a guy of that stature on that kind of a deal is a good deal, and you don't turn it down. It doesn't preclude you from drafting defensive tackles. It doesn't preclude you from anything. So you can
remember now, last year, the $14 million was fully guaranteed at signing. All
Right.
of his money was fully guaranteed. It's different this year. I'm interested to see the full breakdown. We'll get that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Bradberry, we talked about 3 years, 38 million, 12.6 million. Still pretty good considering he got cut by the Giants last year. Other guys that re-signed, we got Slay. We talked about that.
Right.
It'll lower his cap number.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling it a 2-year extension. But what we have not seen is, because it was so that, remember, they went from cutting the guy and saving the 17 million in cash to now paying him. By the way, this is another point of this, is another point of the fully guaranteed money. When you fully guarantee money at signing, you have to put that in escrow. Majority of it, not all of it, but in the latest CBA in 2020, majority of that has to go in escrow. So that's a lot of money they were not counting on paying them. Remember that.
Yeah, I would say so. That's right. All right, so we've talked about all the guys from the team who have re-signed or not re-signed, almost most of them. We did mention Greedy Williams and his opportunity. I want to get into a few other guys that the Eagles signed as unrestricted free agents. First, I want to take a quick break to hear from our great sponsors. Okay, Adam, the Eagles made 2 signings from elsewhere that I find to be pretty fascinating. One of them, we'll start with Rashaad Penny, the running back, which this is such a vintage Eagles signing, right? A guy who has great traits, has had injuries. It's a low risk, high reward deal. It's a 1-year deal, and the guy averages almost 6 yards per carry. I mean, his production when he's healthy is through the roof. It's just the whole when the healthy thing is a big part of the equation.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, on Thursday's show. I love this move. He's so gifted. The question for him is, how many carries could he handle? Because you saw him lead the NFL in rushing like the final quarter or so of 21. And he did have a lot of carries. Pete Carroll ran him into the ground, but he's been hurt more than he's been healthy in his career. But he's super gifted. And we should make this clear. It doesn't preclude them from drafting a running back.
Not at all.
I know there'd be a lot of backs because they just brought Boston Scott back. Trey Sermon's under contract. Kenny Gainwell's a third down back. And they really want to take a look at Trey Sermon. Talking about this for 2 months. Remember, they made a decision not to cut him when they could have, just to clear up when they were bringing guys off IR. They really wanted to take a look at him in the offseason. And I do wonder one thing. Because Kyle Shanahan's a pretty good evaluator, and obviously it was Shanahan's decision to draft him and cut him eventually. What did he see? He must have seen something pretty good. I know he had the one big year and did well in the Senior Bowl. So obviously there's talent here with Trey Sermon.
I mean, go watch the Big Ten championship from his last year.
There you go.
They were struggling against this is Justin Fields as the quarterback. They were struggling against Northwestern. Northwestern can't score points because they never have, great offensive players. Yeah. But they always have good defense. And then in the second half, Ryan Day just says, forget it. We're just going to give the ball to Trey Sermon. I think he carried the ball 20-something, 26, 28, maybe even more than that, for over 200 and something. He ran through that Northwestern defense, and that was good defense. He's a good power runner, sharp cutter. He can catch the ball a little bit. It wasn't something he did a whole lot at either Oklahoma State or Ohio State, but I was told he has the ability to do it. And listen, we know this. The coaches really like him. Love the way he practiced this year, even though he only got into one game and got 2 carries against Jacksonville. Had a great attitude. So I look forward to seeing him compete. He's going to compete with Boston Scott and Rashaad Penny. There's no one's guaranteed anything in this semblance of running backs here. Kenneth Gainwell is probably the only one who's guaranteed to get a really good look now because he's a draft pick. He's young. He had a nice finish to the season. You got to think he's got a good chance to see an increase of reps. But like you said, they might draft a guy, bring another guy in. So, I think this will be one of the cool storylines of summer camp, really. Like, now that Miles Sanders is gone, is who kind of becomes that lead back for the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a lot of candidates. It's fun.
Yeah. And by the way, Sanders, we got his breakdown. This is interesting. He actually technically, as of right now, Monday morning, got the least per average per season, 4 years, 25.4 million. 13 million fully guaranteed at signing, just over 6 million a season, beating David Montgomery just by a hair, just by a little bit.
Wow.
But the thing is, they got him for 4 years, and from what I understand, the Panthers wanted to make sure if they were going to give him over 6, they wanted to get him for 4 years, and the first 2 years are fully guaranteed mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 2-year structure on a 4-year deal. But hey, Sanders got, for a guy who's had an injury history, considering the running backs are not getting paid at all. In fact, think
Mm-hmm.
about this: Henry and Nick Chubb got over 12 million per season 3 years ago. Think about that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. The running back market to me is one of the most fascinating markets every year because it's unpredictable,
Yep.
very unpredictable. All right, so Rashaad Penny, he's in the mix,
Yep.
and we'll see if the sort of different kind of usage for him and running behind the offensive line the Eagles have will be any better for his career. And then, of course, the Eagles lost Gardner Minshew in free agency. He wound up signing with the Colts. Now, it was, what, a 1-year deal with the Colts, right? Which I think was smart for Gardner because the Colts are going to draft a quarterback, be on a rookie. Guy may not be ready. Gardner may have to start the first few weeks of the season, right? If the kid that they draft isn't ready or gets hurt or whatever.
Correct. So you admit the Eagles did have interest in bringing him back, but he, as we noted several times, he really wanted a chance to compete or at least start a little bit. You're right. He might, depending on who they draft at quarterback. So it's a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. It's all fully guaranteed. And there's $2 million in incentives. As I understand it, the incentives are actually very reasonable. I think it starts at 30% playtime to get a little bit of money. So we'll see. We wish him good luck. I mean, he's convinced that he could be a starter in this league. Hopefully, for his sake, he gets a little bit of a chance to do that.
Yeah. So you said the Eagles wanted him back, to your knowledge? They would have liked to have him
Yeah.
back?
They had interest in bringing him back, but they knew they were kind of they knew where he was at in terms of wanting to have a chance to start. There were like 3 to 4 teams in on it with him. But Eagles, once they knew that he was looking to do something like that, they moved on to Plan B.
Yeah, and Plan B is Marcus Mariota. I guess we have to still. So the most important thing on the Marcus contract is that this will not count again. I don't want to say it's the most important thing, but it's something we should mention because he was released by Atlanta. The Eagles don't have to sacrifice anything in their comp pick formula by signing him because he was already released.
Yep.
So what was the deal again? It was a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah, it hasn't actually. It had not been. Eagles haven't announced yet because he hadn't signed yet. But it's fully expected he's going to. And look, Atlanta. One thing you should know: they didn't bench him just to go to Desmond Ridder. They benched him because he wasn't playing well. Got off to a decent start, and then really, he just was struggling a little bit. And then they went to Ridder.
All right, so I'm going to couch what I'm about to say with something positive first.
Okay.
I think the Eagles needed a backup quarterback. Marcus Mariota has good athleticism, so he can sort of, unlike Gardner Minshew, come in and probably run the same style of offense that you run with Jalen Hurts, and that's a good thing to have. I was able to watch about 2 Atlanta games last year, just in general. They were on, those awful Amazon Prime Thursday games. They had a few of them, I think. And I remember I was watching some New Orleans All 22. And they were playing because the Eagles were playing New Orleans. Didn't they play them like week 16 or something like that?
Yes, very late in the season. Yep.
Okay. No, I don't even think that's when I think Ridder was already quarterback. I just remember watching some Falcons All 22 this year for some reason.
Okay.
I thought Mariota was terrible.
He struggled. He lost his confidence. In fact, I remember him owning up to what it was on him not to get Pitts the ball. I mean, before Pitts got hurt, Kyle Pitts we're talking about.
Yeah.
His accuracy was off. He just wasn't comfortable. And Arthur Smith, he wanted him. He knew him obviously from the days with the Titans. It just didn't work, unfortunately. So they cut him. He had a 2-year deal. He got a decent guarantee in year 1 with the Falcons, but there was no fully guaranteed money in year 2, so they cut him. There was a roster bonus of $3 million. They avoided paying that, and the Eagles are bringing him in. And as you said, it doesn't count against the comp pick formula because remember, folks, it's only unrestricted free agents, meaning i.e. their contract expired. And so this one doesn't count. And they brought him in.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Greg Cosell about that signing in particular.
Sure.
Because I know people are going to come at me. You're negative, and no, I'm not. I don't blame the Eagles for the signing. You need a backup quarterback, and he's probably the most experienced backup on the market. And maybe a new environment, new coaching, better offensive line. Maybe things are different. But I just like you were mentioning, and we talked about this sometimes during this, is it Arthur Smith? Is that all that? Like, why can't Kyle Pitts get the ball? And it wasn't because Kyle wasn't open. Marcus was
Yeah.
really just everywhere. He just looked like a guy who was, like you said, lost his confidence, was cooked. And I don't know. I mean, he's never really been all that impressive as a starter, except for of course the game he played against the Eagles in 2019, where he threw for 244 yards and 3 touchdowns. He added a
Oh,
10-yard rushing touchdown, and
is
he threw
that
a touchdown in overtime.
the picket
Yep.
fence game? Was that the picket
Yes.
fence?
Yeah, he
Oh,
completed a 4th
sorry,
and
folks.
19 with a 20-yard pass,
Yeah,
like to
I thought so.
to
Yeah.
Tawan Taylor or something like that. But
Good call. Oh yeah, Twan Taylor could run as a little guy. Yeah,
yeah,
good call.
yeah. So, but I guess the question I would have right now as we sit here, no training camp, no OTAs, is if Jalen Hurts gets hurt and misses a game or two, and you need a guy to get in there and win you a game against a good team, can Marcus Mariota do it? We'll have to see. I sort of, if we're going on last year's tape, I have some. I don't think he's a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew, based on last year's tape.
He's got great athleticism. He's got good size, super high character kid. But from a talent standpoint, from a performance standpoint, he just wasn't there this season.
Yeah.
So you wonder, what is it the Eagles liked about his tape? Is there anyone who used to be with Tennessee who's with the Eagles? I don't know. Is there someone had to vouch for him that liked his
Jason
tape?
Michael,
And
the tight ends coach, the tight ends coach.
oh, Jason Michael was there many years. Maybe he was. It's a good call. Maybe I don't know. We'll
All right.
check into it.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right. As for some other guys, we mentioned some of the contracts. Andre Dillard got 3 years, 28.5 million with the Titans, and Seuamlo getting the deal with the Steelers. So, the Eagles got to work on this offensive line now. They have a question, as we just talked about, at right guard. And then really, they've always prided themselves on having good backups. So Driscoll, if he's not the right guard, will be a good backup. But they don't really have a really good backup left tackle. And who's their top backup left guard at this point? I think that's a big question mark too.
I don't know if they have it. Just a couple things that we do want to mention. Say Milo, Andy Weidel,
Of course.
and Nate Herbig. So remember we said a couple weeks ago, this is going to happen.
Yep.
These former executives or coaches are going to get their guys to do Staley, Miles Sanders, Andy Weidel, say Milo, and Herbie. Minshew, as I understand it, Shane Steichen was the selling point amongst others with the Colts. They're going to run the similar offense that he had in Philly. Now, Andre Dillard, I don't know if I don't know if there's a coach or anyone there, not sure, that knows him, but Dillard's going to be their left tackle. So what does that leave the Eagles moving this forward? You've got Seuamlo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Remember who was cut last year, brought back.
Right.
Brett Toth was cut, brought back. You're right. It's a great point because now you've got Jack Driscoll and Juergens. That's to me. Driscoll's got playing experience. Cam does not.
Yeah, don't forget they kept the kid Josh Sills, who was a rookie free agent, but then he's on commissioner's exempt list.
Yeah,
right?
he's got a major legal issue. So
yeah. So I mean, listen, we know the Eagles better than anybody, right? And so do our listeners. They're going to be rebuilding these trenches starting immediately. So look to the draft. Don't be surprised if they take offensive linemen anywhere in the draft, literally anywhere in the draft, because that's what they do. Yep. But it's certainly an area they got to rebuild, along with the defensive line. You lost Hargrave. We talked about that. So you brought back Fletcher Cox, but you're still really missing a piece of your interior. And then up the middle, Adam, we assume Nakobe Dean steps into a linebacker spot. But, of course, they lost Kazir White to the Cardinals and T.J. Edwards to the Bears. So this is another under construction area for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I love that term, under construction. That's exactly what it is. So right now, it's Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox are your projected starters. Obviously, Cox has to start. I mean, he's a veteran; he'll start. This is why they want to bring him back. They want to have at least one veteran there to help, to be next to Davis. And Fletcher wanted to be back very badly. He loves it in Philly. And then Milt Williams is a good third. The question is, who will be the next D tackle? Is it Noah Ellis? They want to take a look at Tui Pelotu, who had the injury last season, but they obviously need to add one more guy to the mix. And how they do that remains to be seen. But as you said, and we know they think so highly of the offensive defensive lines. They're going to do something. It's just a matter of, do they sign a veteran? Do they draft somebody? That remains to be seen. But they need to add one more guy by training camp.
All right. A couple other things we want to address. First, we're going to stop and let everybody know about our friends at phlsportsnation.com, enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com. And on Twitter, they're at phlsportsnation. Let's also hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. So up the middle, we were talking about, Adam, you lose Epps, you lose Kazir White, you lose TJ Edwards. And also, Zach Pascal was a part of their team. He was sort of a quiet but important part of their slot interior group and special teams. And he's unsigned. So if you're not going to bring him back, and seeing what we saw from Quez Watkins last year, the inconsistency. I saw the Bills got cut loose Isaiah McKenzie. That was kind of surprising to me. I wonder if he's a guy that you look at and say, hey, that's a decent slot receiver right there.
He's a smaller gadget player, really explosive. See, the reason why the Eagles love, and particularly the head coach, love Pascal, because he blocks for the run game, special teamer, and he's an enforcer. I mean, and I love that name that Nick gave him. Sirianni calls him enforcer because that's what he does. You and I saw that last spring. Remember, we were like, whoa, who is this Zach Pascal?
Yep.
The presence, I think you'd mention it. He just stands out. I know he's a backup, doesn't catch the ball a lot, but he's a really good role player in what they ask him to do. By the way, he's still inside. He's the only offensive player that was a free agent for the Eagles that's unsigned right now because Minshew signed, Colts, Sanders, Panthers, Dillard, Titans, Seuamlo, Steelers, and Pascal is still available. So, hey, theoretically, he could be back.
It would be nice if the Eagles brought him back. I think he does bring some leadership to that room. He is rocked up. I mean, he's a big dude. That's why he's a good blocker. He does remind me a little bit of like the Jason Avant of the team, except Avant was actually used more in the offense. But he just his presence. He has that kind of vibe to him, and I think that when you run the ball as much as the Eagles do, you really do need to have that interior presence, be a blocker, a good guy who can do the crack back on a linebacker and get out there. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're able to get him or if they wanted to bring him back.
Presence, presence. He sets the tone. It's such a hard-nosed player. I know, again, it's not a statistical thing with him. You can't see it in numbers, but he just brings something different, and clearly see why Sirianni wanted him in Philly. It's pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's explain to the people. I'm going to let you do this the best you can. Why Robert Quinn, if somebody signs him to a deal, that would not count in the comp pick formula for the Eagles.
Yes, because what you cannot. Not that they would do any team that does this. If you lower the amount of years the guys, let's say you made a trade with a guy for a player. In this case, they did with Quinn. Let's say he had 3 years left on his deal. Well, the Eagles and Quinn's agent and Quinn agreed that they were going to take off 1 year on the deal. So that completely kills because you can't circumvent it because they'd be in a way circumventing it, going from 2 years he had 2 years left and they cut it down to 1.
Right.
Well, you can't think about it. What if they did it to 10 different players?
Yeah.
And that would be circumventing. That's not what they did. They just did it because it was a 1 year look-see on the player.
Right.
And they know he's an older player. And so the NFL sent me the list. There are 5 players around the NFL that are not part of, although their contract expired, but because of a restructure or they lowered the years, he's not the team, the former club is not allowed to get a comp pick for him. That would be Quinn. Not that it would really matter because if he signs for someone, it's going to be a better minimum anyway. But
sure,
that's where that's at.
All right, and of course, Joseph and Sue remained. They may not. They may do the same thing. They may either retire or just sign next November when there's a team that looks like they need a interior defensive lineman and it looks pretty good.
Yeah, and look, and they got the identical contracts. Boy, particularly Joseph. He did such a good job. Some people are saying he cut off the end, but for what they asked him to help stop the run, you notice how much better their run defense when he would be in there. Did a good job. Seuss showed he had a little bit left, but Joseph of the two older guys did a good job, and that pretty much covers. We talked about Kelsey's contract, Cox's, Graham's, Bradberry's, Penny's, Mariota. Well, actually, we don't know the number yet. We're interested to see. I would think it would kind of mirror Minshew's because Mariota got cut. He didn't have a good year. And then Epps, we talked about the last show, 2 years, $12 million, $5.15 million for the guarantee with the Raiders. And remember, he's from California. No state income tax, I believe, in Nevada. T.J. Edwards goes, isn't he from Chicago?
Yes.
That area?
Yes.
So,
he is.
And that, because I know a lot of people were surprised with what he got. 3 years, $19.5 million, just about $8 million fully guaranteed. It's not a bad deal, but it wasn't quite probably what he should have gotten. But I thought, and still do, beauty's in the eye of the beholder with him. And a lot of teams aren't going to lay. He's not the biggest guy in the world, not great in coverage, but just a good football player.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, we'll get into punters next episode. No need to.
And the one thing, do we talk about the Nichols coach?
Oh yeah, that's a great point. The Eagles brought in a Nichols coach, Ronell Williams, right?
Yep.
So I know somebody who knows him pretty well, and knows about his ascent in Chicago. Well, him in Chicago, because he said, he reminded me that when Sean Desai went from defensive quality control coach to secondaries coach with the Bears, I think it was secondaries coach, under Vic Fangio, Ronell Williams became the defensive quality control coach. So Sean Desai got to know Ronell Williams there pretty well. And I'm told that he likes him a lot, and that even though he's coming here to be the nickel backs coach, which sounds like a very small and limited role, to not be surprised if he climbs that coaching ladder pretty quickly there and has, has a pretty decent say in what goes on strategically in the backfield. But it does look like at the moment, DK McDonald will be the secondary coach because he was the assistant defensive backs coach. And then Denard Wilson is obviously now with the Ravens. So they haven't done anything else but other than bring in Ronell Williams, right?
Yeah, no, but this is interesting. So DK McDonald right now will be the DB's coach more or less, because with Denard Wilson going to the Ravens, and McDonald, he's coached corners and safeties many years at the college level. Like the Eagles really like him.
Yes.
But Denard Wilson was phenomenal. I mean, one of their best assistant coaches. That's a loss, by the way. This is not a criticism. The two guys are here, but this guy did a phenomenal job, and it didn't. In fact, we know that there were other. It was not just the Ravens who were in trying to add him to their staff. So we'll see. We'll see if there's any drop off overall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But yeah, Ronell Williams is coaching nickelbacks, which is, I think the Eagles are one of maybe 2 or 3 teams now in the NFL that has a nickelbacks coach. And as I joked with you once before, we'll see if they bring in a pulling guards coach and a box safeties coach as well. But no, I'm just kidding.
Or slot corner, or slot receiver.
Slot wide receivers coach. Right. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds.